it's obviously hard to define what a perfect movie is, but it's more of when you're watching them, you get that feeling, and you just think to yourself, "This is a perfect movie." It's kind of unquantifiable, which is ironic because today I'm going to try to make the case for 3 films that I think are perfect movies. I have trouble defining them in terms of what makes them perfect, or really what perfect means. It's not a Rotten Tomatoes score of 100%. These are great critical acclaim. These aren't movies that everybody loves, although they could be. They're just movies that you can't complain about. They possess a certain je ne sais quoi, or a charm that can't quite be explained. They're funny, they're fun, they make you cry happily or sad, and they're just unquantifiable and making you feel good. First off, Real Steel is not one of the perfect movies. The first perfect movie is Back to the Future. I'm going to do these chronologically. The first Back to the Future, to me, is a perfect movie. It's got a great blend of genres. It's got sci-fi. It's primarily comedic, but it's very clever in how it goes about it. And obviously, it's not a thinking man's time travel movie, like a chicken before the egg thing necessarily, but it is just so fun. The music's great. You just want to root for Marty. He's a great character. Everything about it is timeless too, because of that kind of Back to the Future. And of course everyone loves the 80s motif anyway, that's being played on against going back into the 50s. And of course, me being a child of the 80s and 90s, like, this is something I grew up with, and my parents were children of the 50s, so it just related well to all of us, and I think it's a perfect movie. The second movie is more of a wild card. This came out in 1990s. It's Tremors, another kind of genre blending film, and I think that might be an important theme here, is that it's a horror movie kind of at its heart, but really it's a comedy. But it does such a good job of, like, hey, the funny parts are funny. The horror parts are scary enough, especially younger, or if you don't watch a lot of horror movies. But it also it has good action. Again, the characters are so fun. The music is great, and this is kind of like one of those horror movies that I think you consider a cult classic. It wasn't huge when it came out, but I haven't met anyone that hasn't been like, oh yeah, Tremors is bad. Like, everyone's like, oh no, I love that movie. And it just kind of is one of those, oh, if it's on TV, you sit and watch it for a little bit. And really by the end, similar to Back to the Future, like, there's just some clever parts. Like, I always will remember the pole vaulting part over the rocks and the music. And yeah, it's almost got that buddy cop feel, even though they're not cops, between Kevin Bacon and Fred Ward. So again, another one of those movies that just really kind of, hey, it's got that good horror element. There are some scary parts, but it puts the genres together just perfectly. And I mean, it's got another one of those positive endings where, part of maybe being a perfect movie is that you're not going through an emotional roller coaster. It's nice to know that things end up in a good way, but it's just so fun. The last movie is a lot more modern. The Martian was a big surprise to me. I love sci-fi. It's by far my favorite genre, but it's also one of the hardest genres to get good films in. Horror probably being the hardest, but sci-fi, there's just a lot of crap out there, or things that were so promising and they end up not being good. But The Martian is pretty hard sci-fi in terms of going for very realistic. There were those idiots that were like, oh, is that based on a true story? Yes, they're dumb, but that's also a testament to the movie being very well done from a realistic standpoint. But you can make fun of the Golden Globes for nominating this as a best comedy, but I can almost see where that argument could come in, because it does have a lot of funny parts. I mean, Matt Damon is great. NASA, the guys back at NASA, they have a lot of good quips and, good, sharp, snappy dialogue. There's just a lot of great stuff that happens in this movie. And of course, it's very clever, like I mentioned, especially, like Back to the Future, like Tremors, there's these parts that are clever. And this movie is kind of precipitated on that fact because he has to be clever to get out of the situation he's in. And, there are a lot of movies where you can imply that this character is really smart, and that's why they can do that, and that's why they outsmart other people or outsmart the situation. But I think this movie does a great job of actually making you feel a part of that. Like, oh, this is how he's figuring it out. And again, it's all backed by scientific theory, or at least actual science or logic. And it's incredible. I mean, there is a part at the end, of course, that kind of defies logic, but then that's where the movie part comes in. And if it was by the books and, this will work because science tells us to without taking some chance, it wouldn't be quite as fun. And it's a very uplifting film. It's one of those movies that I love to just put on, and whether that's to fall asleep to, and I mean that in a positive way, like it's just a pleasure to watch. So those are the 3 movies that I consider perfect. This is an evolving list. I can make an argument for a lot of other movies, but I feel like these movies just have that mix that a lot of other movies don't have. So if you care to, let me know if you have any movies that you think kind of fit along this line that you would consider perfect. Maybe we can do another video. But yeah, 3 perfect movies: Back to the Future, Tremors, and The Martian.